Hi everybody, this is your feedback for your SDME mock. I'm going to go through each of the questions stage by stage. So you should have in front of you now your mock SDME. Have a quick sift through your questions, have a look at the marks that you've got. Have a pen ready so as you can take down some notes of how to improve each of your questions. So please pause the tape now. So this is question 1. Everybody got full marks on question 1, which was absolutely fantastic. Explain 2 reasons why people continue to live in areas of tectonic risk. I like how Aleri set her question out here. She's given the first reason, put a number 1 next to it, so as you're under no illusion that this is your first reason, and she's developed that point well. You can see that she's used this means that as a connector to show development in the question. So as everybody got full marks, you can have a look at your partners, at your neighbours, and see exactly how they got the marks. But it was really well done. It was lovely to start marking a paper with everybody not dropping any marks. Okay. The next question is question 2. Before I go into any depth about the question, I want to point out a what not to do. This is an example of a student whose writing is quite large, which is absolutely fine. The issue is that you've not used the extra pages at the back of the paper. The writing that is on the bottom down here, an examiner won't be able to see this. These papers are scanned in and it's very difficult. That paper would have to be sent away for a special request. So just as a little bit of maintenance or something to remember, please use the extra pages at the back of the paper and simply write "see back of paper" underneath round about here, and an examiner will be able to go and look for it. It was wonderful to see on quite a few papers that you remembered to put SPAG above the question where your SPAG marks were available, and it just kept it in the back of your mind to double check through your work and make sure that you'd written in to the best of your ability to reach those marks. So question 2 was answered really well again by the majority of the class. Thankfully, nobody fell into a level 1, and really that was where you just had some very simple descriptions, taking the data from the table, not really making any comment about what extent the magnitude was linked to the cost of damage. A number of you fell into level 2, 3 to 4 marks. So you've used some data from the table, but you haven't really explained the link in enough detail. It was supported, but not supported strongly enough. To get up into a level 3, you had to be able to say that yes, there was some link between magnitude and the cost of damage. For example, Honshu in Japan had a 9.0 magnitude on the Richter scale with 300 billion. You can see Indonesia 8.5, which was 180 million. Just realised what I've done there. So scrap my last comment because I can't figure out how to clear that bit of the recording. Sorry. So Honshu in Japan, 9.0 on the Richter scale, 300 billion US dollars, whereas China is only 7.9 magnitude on the Richter scale, and it's 150 billion US dollars, which is half the price of Japan. So to get up into that level 3, 5 or 6 marks, the examiner is looking for that you've shown that there is a link to some extent, but possibly that other factors have been party to the damage. So, for example, an LEDC versus an MEDC, whether a country is densely populated versus sparsely populated. And I was really pleased to see your kind of wider geographical knowledge, knowing about Central Alaska having very low population densities versus China and Japan. One thing that quite a few of you wrote was China, an MEDC. China is not an MEDC. Parts of it are very, very well developed, but overall the country is an LEDC. So please try and keep that in mind. Japan is an MEDC, not an LEDC. And they were simple little mistakes that I found cropping up. So just try and remember that in case something like this does come up in your exam. It could be volcanoes as a tectonic activity, and those, it might be LEDC, MEDC countries that you need to think about. Okay, question 3A, emergency response. Really well answered question. Don't think anybody dropped a mark on that first part of emergency response. So emergency provision, you could have given examples, fire and rescue, some kind of aid, a fast response, and so on. They really well answered. You could have had any of those and a combination of those. Monitoring was not answered so well. To get that mark for monitoring, you needed to be able to say collecting or recording information, and perhaps give an example of a piece of equipment like a seismometer or a tilt meter or satellite imaging, heat detectors, and so on, or maybe timing in between foreshocks of an earthquake or something. You were not allowed to have keeping an eye on the hazard or watching the hazard. That was not permitted to have any credit. So if you do get a question like this, similar to this, whether it's talking about tectonics or a climatic hazard, try and always give an example. So you could monitor a tectonic hazard by using equipment like a seismometer or something onto that ilk. Try and back it up with something that you know about, rather than just being a little bit wishy-washy with your answers. So quite a few of you dropped some. Question 3B. There was a number of ways you could get the 4 marks in this question. You could simply have made 4 simple statements and could have had a tick for each of those. You could have made 2 statements and developed them, where you would have a tick and a DEV, a little dev next to it to show that you've developed. 3 ticks and 1 development, or 1 tick and 3 developments. So on each of your question papers there will be a number of different ways that I've marked it. So just a little bit of explanation for you there. So individual marks could be things for they don't have money, they have better technology, something to do with their level of development. If you said that MEDCs have a better response because they have more money, and LEDCs have a poorer or worse response because they have less money, that was actually only one valid point, because you were just saying the same thing but in a different way. So here's an example of a developed point that comes directly from the mark scheme, so you can see where the points are allocated. We've got some countries have more money, that's your tick, so they can afford a better emergency services, that's your first development, with quicker response times, another development, so less lives are lost, that's your third development, and your 4 marks in total. If you haven't got 4 marks, we can pause the tape now, or recording, so as you can have a read at some of your peers' work. If you do have full marks, it's still good to have a read at how other people have written their question. Please pause now. Question 4. First of all, brilliant to see once again that people have written SPAG at the top, so as you're aware that you're going to have some allocation for SPAG marks. Second of all, the little bugbear has crept in again. Please use the extra pages at the back if you run out of space. It makes it so much easier to mark, especially as your work's going to be scanned in. Always make an examiner's life easier, so they don't have to look so difficult, so hard for your marks. For this question, you've got to make sure that you don't just copy the material straight off the booklet. If you've just simply lifted the material and not written anything in your own words, you can't get more than a level 1. Most of you have adapted it in some way, so have fallen into level 2 to level 3. Most people in level 2. So try to use the material but put things into your own words, and if possible add some other mitigating factors, and you'll see that you needed to add some mitigating factors to actually reach that level 3. There was only a couple of examples in the class who managed to get up into that level 3. So if you talked about things like wealth being a mitigating factor, time of day being a mitigating factor, response times, shanty towns, all of those different things that a number of you mentioned in your papers. Something that you've taken that little bit further to help you get up into that level 3 answer. If you didn't do that in your answer, just put a little note at the bottom of the question, if you get something like this in your exam, to think outside the box a little bit, use your geographical knowledge and try and pull a reason that might not be so obvious sitting there into your question. Okay, lastly on to question 5. This is where you had to make the decision. Really, really impressed with the standard of answers that I received in this. There was a couple of students who've fallen into a level 4. And some top level 3s. So feel free to share your answers out and have a look at different people's writing styles. So you can see the mark scheme here. Little observation. A couple of you misread the questions and you talked about social sustainability, economic sustainability and environmental sustainability. In this occasion, if you talked about environmental sustainability, it was actually a waste of your time. You've got to read the question really, really carefully and just stick to what it asks you to do. You don't get any extra merit if you're not asked to do it in this section. So when you're in the exam, make sure that you read the questions carefully and only answer what it asks you to do, and also tick off each of the bullet points once you've completely answered that section, because there was a few people who didn't actually do the last question, which talked about the integrated approach, which meant that whatever level you fell into, you couldn't reach that top level because you hadn't fully answered the question. So you don't want to miss out on vital marks, because this last question is grade breaking. You get it right, get higher level. If you get it wrong, it can go really wrong. Luckily, nobody's gone really wrong in their answers in your mock, which is a really good sign, and you're heading in the right direction. So make sure that you all have your firm understanding of sustainability, which I was really impressed with throughout the question. Those of you who fell into level 2 and bottom level 3, it was the development of your points. And what I mean by that is you hadn't used the connectors that we've talked about. So this means that, therefore this will mean that, so the people will. This is economically unsustainable because, trying to connect the answers and take it that little bit further, that's going to make or break your answer. So take a little bit of time now, share your papers around, see who's got level 3 and a couple of level 4 answers, and look and see what you could do in your answers to get yourself up to that level, top level 3, or even into a level 4. It is very difficult to get into a level 4 answer. Hope you find this helpful. Good luck for your exam on Tuesday. You're really well prepared. Just have all your sustainability ideas in the back of your mind, and remember, when you're in the exam, just take a little bit of time to look through the paper before you start. Don't panic, you've got plenty of time in it, and I'm really confident that you can do well. Best wishes.